Commander Jin-Ho Park took a deep breath as the airlock hissed open. This moment would go down in history. He was the first human to step onto Celestial Station, the massive alien structure orbiting Jupiter. "Remember your training," he whispered to himself. The metal floor echoed under his boots as he stepped forward. The air smelled clean but strange, with a sweet note he couldn't place. The corridor ahead glowed with soft blue light. 3 aliens waited for him. Jin-Ho had seen pictures, but they were different in person. They looked almost human, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and faces that showed clear emotions. But their skin had a faint purple tint, and their eyes were large and completely black. All 3 had silver-white hair that seemed to float slightly, as if underwater. They were all female. In fact, their entire species was female. The tallest one stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Yun of the Nari Collective. Welcome to Celestial Station, Commander Park." Jin-Ho bowed slightly. "Thank you for your welcome, Ambassador. I bring greetings from Earth." Yun nodded stiffly. Her face showed nothing, but Jin-Ho noticed her eyes. They kept moving over him, studying every inch. The other 2 Nari were doing the same, with even less attempt to hide their interest. "Please follow me," Yun said. "I will show you to your quarters." As they walked through the station, Jin-Ho saw more Nari. Each one stopped to stare as he passed. Some whispered to each other. Others just watched with wide eyes. "Your people seem very interested in humans," Jin-Ho said carefully. Yun's steps faltered for just a moment. "You are the first male being to board this station in 20 years. The last was a trader from the Vega system. He stayed for 3 days." "I see." Jin-Ho didn't really see, but he nodded anyway. They reached a door that slid open to reveal a simple room. It had been adjusted to human needs, with a bed, desk, and bathroom facilities. "These will be your quarters during your stay," Yun said. "The temperature and gravity are set to Earth normal. If you require adjustments, use the panel by the bed." "Thank you, Ambassador." Yun hesitated, then asked, "Is it true that human society is half male and half female?" "Roughly, yes. About 51% female, 49% male on Earth." "And you reproduce together. Each child has a mother and a father." Jin-Ho felt his face grow warm. "Yes, that's how humans reproduce." Yun's black eyes seemed to grow even wider. "Fascinating. The Nari reproduce through self-division. 1 becomes 2. But our birth rates have been falling for generations." An awkward silence fell between them. Jin-Ho noticed Yun's hands were trembling slightly. "Are you all right, Ambassador?" he asked. She clasped her hands tightly. "Yes. I apologize. Your presence is stimulating for my biology. All Nari are experiencing this. It's why security has been increased around your quarters." Jin-Ho blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "Something about human males triggers ancient responses in our bodies. Responses we thought were lost to evolution." Yun took a step back. "It's nothing to concern yourself with. We are professionals." A small alarm chimed from Yun's wrist. She looked relieved. "The welcome ceremony will begin in 1 hour. I will return to escort you." As she turned to leave, Jin-Ho called out, "Ambassador Yun." She paused but didn't turn around. "I look forward to learning more about your people," he said. Her shoulders tensed visibly. "And we look forward to learning about yours, Commander." She almost ran from the room. As the door closed behind her, Jin-Ho sat heavily on the bed. His diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for this. He was apparently causing some kind of biological reaction in an entire species just by existing. "What have I gotten myself into?" he whispered to the empty room. The welcome ceremony was unlike anything Jin-Ho had ever seen. 50 Nari officials stood in perfect circles in the Great Hall. They wore silver robes that caught the light as they moved in slow, synchronized patterns. It was part dance, part military display. Jin-Ho stood next to Ambassador Yun, trying to look properly impressed. He noticed that the Nari kept glancing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. "This dance shows the unity of our people," Yun explained. Her voice was tight, controlled. "We are many, but we move as one." "It's beautiful," Jin-Ho said honestly. Yun's cheeks darkened with a purple blush. She quickly looked away. After the ceremony came the feast. Jin-Ho sat at a long table with Nari officials on all sides. They asked him endless questions about Earth and humans. "Do all human males look like you?" asked a Nari scientist named Mai. "No, we come in many different appearances," Jin-Ho said. "Different heights, skin colors, builds." "Fascinating," Mai said, leaning too close. "And you all produce these pheromones." Yun cleared her throat loudly. "Dr. Mai, perhaps we could discuss science another time." The meal consisted of strange fruits and something like fish. Jin-Ho ate carefully, aware of all the eyes watching him. An older Nari with decorations on her robe spoke up. "I am Chief Minister Du. Tell us, Commander Park, why does Earth seek contact with the Nari now?" Jin-Ho chose his words carefully. "Earth believes in peaceful contact with all intelligent species. When we detected your station 5 years ago, it seemed natural to introduce ourselves." Minister Du nodded slowly. "And what does Earth want from us?" "Knowledge. Trade, perhaps. Friendship, hopefully." The minister's black eyes narrowed. Nothing more. Jin-Ho felt tension rise in the room. What more would there be? Yun jumped in quickly. "Minister, the commander cannot know of our situation. That information is classified." Jin-Ho looked between them. "What situation?" The table fell silent. Minister Du stared at Jin-Ho for a long moment, then stood up. "This meal is concluded. Ambassador Yun, continued the commander's orientation." After the others left, Jin-Ho turned to Yun. "What was that about?" Yun sighed. "Come with me. I will show you our reality." She led him to a quiet observation deck overlooking a massive garden dome. Below, Jin-Ho could see Nari of all ages walking among strange plants and fountains. "This station was built for 10,000 Nari," Yun said quietly. "We now number less than 4,000. "What happened?" Jin-Ho asked. "Our reproduction is failing. Each generation, fewer and fewer children are born." Yun's voice grew sad. "Many of us can no longer divide at all. In 3 generations, the Nari may cease to exist." Jin-Ho felt the weight of her words. "I'm sorry. Is there anything humans can do to help?" Yun turned to look at him. Her black eyes reflected the stars outside. "Your presence here is already doing something, though we don't understand what. Since your arrival, many Nari have reported feeling different." "Different how?" "More alive. More everything." Yun stepped closer to him. Jin-Ho could smell something like vanilla coming from her skin. "Some of our scientists believe human males trigger ancient pathways in our biology. Pathways that might save us." Jin-Ho swallowed hard. "Is that why everyone keeps staring at me?" Yun's lips curved into a small smile. "Partly, but also because you are very different from us. Your strength, your voice, your movements." She reached out as if to touch his arm, then quickly pulled her hand back. "I apologize. I forgot myself." "It's fine," Jin-Ho said, though his heart was beating faster. A group of young Nari appeared at the far end of the observation deck. When they spotted Jin-Ho, they giggled and whispered to each other. Yun sighed. "It seems you have admirers already. Come, Commander. Tomorrow you will meet our science team. They have many questions for you." As they walked away, Jin-Ho wondered what he had gotten himself into. He was a diplomat, not a biological specimen. But if his presence could somehow help save an entire species. He looked at Yun walking ahead of him, her silver hair floating gently around her shoulders. Helping her people suddenly seemed very important. Jin-Ho stood in the science lab, feeling like an exhibit in a zoo. 5 Nari scientists moved around him. taking readings with strange devices that hummed and glowed. "Please hold still, Commander," said Dr. May, waving the silver wand near his head. "We're measuring your electromagnetic field." "Is this really necessary?" Jin-Ho asked Eun, who stood in the corner with her arms crossed. "Our scientists believe your maleness produces energy we can detect," Eun explained. She looked uncomfortable. A young scientist named Ha approached with a small device. "This will sample the air around you. It won't hurt." Jin-Ho nodded. He had been poked and prodded for 3 days now. The Nari scientists were always polite, but very thorough. "Fascinating," Ha whispered as her device beeped. "The pheromone levels are rising." Dr. Mai rushed over. "Let me see." The two scientists huddled over the device, talking excitedly. Eun stepped forward. "That's enough for today. The commander has a diplomatic reception to prepare for." The scientists looked disappointed, but backed away. As Jin-Ho followed Eun out of the lab, he heard Ha whisper. His skin looked so warm. In the corridor, Jin-Ho asked, "What exactly are they looking for?" Eun walked quickly, not meeting his eyes. "Something that might explain why your presence affects us so strongly." "And how does it affect you?" Jin-Ho asked quietly. Eun stopped walking. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she turned to face him. "It's difficult to explain. We feel more energetic, more aware. Some report feeling heat under their skin when you're near." "And you? What do you feel?" Eun's black eyes met his. "I feel hungry, but not for food." She immediately looked horrified at her own words. "Forgive me. That was inappropriate." Before Jin-Ho could respond, Eun hurried away, leaving him alone and confused in the corridor. The diplomatic reception was held in the Grand Hall. Jin-Ho wore his formal uniform and tried to remember the names of all the Nari officials who greeted him. There seemed to be more of them each time, all finding reasons to stand near him. Minister Du watched from across the room, her expression unreadable. "Commander Park," a voice said behind him. Jin-Ho turned to see Ha, the young scientist from earlier. She wore a blue robe and had decorated her silver hair with tiny lights. "Hello, Dr. Ha," Jin-Ho said politely. "Just Ha, please." She smiled broadly. "I wanted to apologize for today. Sometimes science makes us forget manners." "No apology needed. I understand your curiosity." Has stepped closer. "Would you tell me about Earth? About your home?" Jin-Ho described Seoul, where he had grown up. He told her about the mountains, the busy streets, the food. Ha listened with wide eyes, asking questions about everything. "It sounds wonderful," she said, moving even closer. "To have so many different people, male and female, all living together." Jin-Ho noticed Eun watching them from across the room. She looked worried. "Does your kind touch often?" He asked suddenly. "Well, yes. We shake hands when meeting. Friends might hug. Family members kiss." "Kiss?" Ha's eyes grew even wider. "What is kiss?" Before Jin-Ho could answer, He stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a tight embrace. The room went completely silent. Eun rushed over. "Ha! Release him at once." But He didn't let go. She pressed her face against Jin-Ho's chest and took a deep breath. "So warm," she whispered. 2 security officers appeared and gently pulled Ha away. The young scientist looked dazed, her cheeks dark purple. Minister Du approached, her face stern. "Commander Park, please accept our deepest apologies for this incident." "It's fine, really," Jin-Ho said, embarrassed by all the attention. "It is not fine," Du said sharply. She turned to Eun. "Take the commander to his quarters. Then report to my office." As Eun led him away, Jin-Ho could feel every Nari watching them. The silence was heavy with tension. "What just happened?" he asked when they were alone in the elevator. Eun looked miserable. "Physical contact between Nari is rare and meaningful. What He did was extremely intimate by our standards. I had no idea, Jin-Ho said, shocked. Will she be in trouble? Yes. And so will I, for failing to protect you. Yun's voice trembled slightly. Things are happening too fast. No one expected your effect on us to be so strong. As the elevator doors opened, Jin-Ho wondered what other cultural misunderstandings lay ahead, and why, despite the awkwardness, he found himself wanting to know more about the mysterious Neri, especially Yun. Jin-Ho didn't see Yun for 2 days after the incident. A different Neri officer brought his meals and escorted him to scheduled meetings. No one mentioned Ha or what had happened. On the third morning, Yun appeared at his door. She looked tired, with dark circles under her black eyes. "Good morning, Commander," she said formally. "I apologize for my absence." "Are you okay?" Jin-Ho asked. "What happened with Minister Du?" Yun stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "I have been reassigned. I am now part of the scientific team studying the human effect on Nari biology. And Ha, she is confined to quarters for now, but her actions have led to an important discovery." Yun hesitated. "Would you come to the lab? Dr. Mai wishes to show you something." The main science lab was busier than before. Nari in white coats rushed around, checking screens and talking in excited voices. Dr. Mai waved them over to a large display. "Commander Park. Perfect timing." Dr. May pointed to a screen showing 2 cells side by side. The left is a normal Nari reproductive cell. The right is the same cell after exposure to air you have breathed. Jin-Ho looked closely. The cell on the right glowed with a faint blue light. "What does it mean?" he asked. Dr. Mai smiled widely. "It means your presence activates dormant gene sequences we thought were lost thousands of years ago." Another scientist joined them. "We believe the Nari once reproduced differently, not through self-division, but through genetic mixing with a male species." "Like humans do?" Jin-Ho asked. "Similar, yes," Dr. Mai said. "Over time, we evolved to reproduce without males, but the old pathways remain in our DNA, just inactive." Yun spoke quietly. "And what Ha experienced, what many of us feel around the commander, is the awakening of those old instincts." Jin-Ho tried to understand. "So my presence is triggering some kind of ancient mating response." The scientists nodded eagerly. Yun looked at the floor, her cheeks darkening. "How does this help your reproduction problem?" Jin-Ho asked. Dr. Mai brought up new images on the screen. "These are division rates in Nari cells. The blue line shows normal division. The red line shows division after exposure to human pheromones. The red line was nearly twice as high as the blue. We believe human presence could reactivate our reproductive capabilities," Dr. Mai explained. "Not to produce human Nari offspring, but to restore our own ability to divide properly." Jin-Ho felt overwhelmed. "So what happens now?" Before anyone could answer, the lab doors slid open. Minister Du entered with 4 security officers. Her face was stern. "What happens now," Minister Du said coldly, "is that we must make decisions about our future. The High Council is meeting to discuss these findings." She looked at Jin-Ho. "You have created quite a stir, Commander Park. Some believe you represent hope for our people. Others fear you will destroy our way of life." "I don't want to cause problems," Jin-Ho said honestly. Minister Du's expression softened slightly. "I believe you. But intentions matter less than effects, and your effect on my people is profound." She turned to leave, then paused. "Ambassador Yun, remain with the commander. Explain our history to him. He should understand what is at stake." After Du left, Jin-Ho turned to Yun. "What did she mean?" Yun led him to a quiet corner of the lab. "Long ago, the Neri shared our home world with another species. They were our partners, our other half. When disease took them, we evolved to survive alone. But part of you still remembers them," Jin-Ho said slowly. "Yes," Yun whispered. And now you have awakened that memory in every Nari on this station. Jin-Ho looked around at the busy lab, at all the Nari working to understand what was happening. I'm sorry. Bun's hand moved toward his, then stopped just before touching. Don't be. For the first time in generations, we have hope. Their eyes met, and Jin-Ho felt something shift between them. Not just biology or diplomacy, but something simpler and more complicated at the same time. Ambassador Yun, he said quietly. Just she replied, her voice barely audible. Outside the lab windows, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. Jin-Ho couldn't sleep. It had been a week since the discoveries in the lab, and things on the station had changed. More security guards followed him everywhere. Some Nari looked at him with hope, others with fear. He got up and went to his desk. Bun had given him access to Nari history files. He had been reading about their past, trying to understand. Something in the files bothered him. Dates didn't match up. The record said the Nari lost their partner species 2,000 years ago, but other parts mentioned problems starting just 50 years ago. A soft knock on his door surprised him. It was the middle of the night by station time. Who is it? He called. It's Ha, came a whispered reply. Please let me in. Quickly. Jin-Ho opened the door. Had slipped inside, looking over her shoulder nervously. She wore a plain gray robe and looked like she hadn't slept in days. I'm sorry to come like this, she said, but you need to know the truth. What truth? Jin-Ho asked. Should I call Yun? No, Ha said sharply. She can't know I'm here. Not yet. She pulled a small device from her pocket. This contains files from the secure database. Files even most Nari don't know about. She placed it on his desk. A hologram appeared showing laboratory images and charts. 23 years ago, a ship visited this station, he explained. Not from Earth, but from a world called Tarak. They were all male, like you. Jin-Ho looked at the images. The aliens looked somewhat like the Nari, but with darker skin and no hair. What happened to them? He asked. Ha's voice dropped lower. Minister Su happened. She was chief scientist then. She took samples from the visitors. Blood, tissue, genetic material. A hologram changed to show laboratory scenes. Jin-Ho felt sick as he realized what he was seeing. They experimented on them. Han nodded. Su was trying to solve our reproduction problem even then, but her methods were cruel. When the Tarak discovered what was happening, they fled. They sent warnings to other species to avoid Nari space. That's why no one contacted the Nari until Earth, Jin-Ho said, understanding now. Yes. Su covered it up. She told everyone the Tarak left for their own reasons. Ha pointed at more images, but she kept the research going in secret labs. She's been trying to create a cure using the samples they took. Jin-Ho sat down heavily. Does Minister Du know about this? Some of it, but not the worst parts. He looked at him with serious eyes. Jin-Ho, Su is now pushing for the council to take samples from you. Extensive samples. A chill ran through Jin-Ho. You mean? Yes, the same things they did to the Tarak. He grabbed his hand. You must be careful. Su has supporters. They believe saving our species justifies any action. The door suddenly slid open. 2 security officers stood there with stun weapons drawn. Behind them was Minister Su, a tall Nari with cold eyes. How predictable, Su said, looking at Ha with disgust. Another young fool infatuated with the alien. Run, Ha shouted, pushing Jin-Ho toward the bathroom door. But it was too late. A blue light flashed, and Ha fell to the floor. The second officer fired at Jin-Ho. Pain exploded through his body, and darkness took him. When Jin-Ho woke, he was strapped to a cold table in a room he'd never seen before. Medical equipment surrounded him. His head pounded, and his mouth felt dry. I apologize for the rough treatment, Commander, said Minister Su, stepping into view. But we have little time. Our species faces extinction, and you carry our salvation in your cells. Where's Ha? Jin Ho demanded, struggling against the restraints. And Eun needs to know I'm here. Su smiled coldly. Ambassador Eun believes you've been called back to Earth for emergency consultations. As for the young scientist, she shrugged. Her actions were treasonous. Jin Ho felt fear grip him, not just for himself, but for Hai and the future of human-Nari relations. You won't get away with this, he said, trying to sound confident. I already have, Su replied, picking up a syringe. Now, let's begin. Eun stood before Minister Du, her hands clenched at her sides. What do you mean, return to Earth? There was no scheduled departure, Eun said, struggling to keep her voice calm. Minister Du looked tired. The human government called him back suddenly. Some emergency. He left while you were off duty. Without saying goodbye, Eun couldn't hide her disbelief. That doesn't sound like Jin Ho. Commander Park, Du corrected her sharply. Remember your position, Ambassador. Eun bowed her head, but her mind raced. Something felt wrong. She had spent enough time with Jin Ho to know he wouldn't leave without a word. Where is Ha? She asked suddenly. I need to speak with her about the research data. Minister Du's expression hardened. Dr. Ha has been reassigned to the outer labs. Her behavior at the reception showed poor judgment. Eun left Du's office with more questions than answers. In the corridor, she nearly bumped into Dr. May. May, have you seen Jin Ho? I mean, Commander Park. Dr. Mai looked nervous. I heard he returned to Earth. It's a shame. Our research was progressing so well. Did you see him leave? Did anyone? Mai glanced around to make sure they were alone. No. And it's strange. Minister Su canceled our morning lab session with him, then announced he was gone. Eun felt cold fear in her stomach. Where is Minister Su now? In the restricted lab section. The one used for special projects. Mai moved closer. Eun, be careful. Strange things are happening. Eun hurried to her quarters. She needed to think. The restricted labs were off-limits to most Nari, but as an ambassador, she had emergency access codes. Using them without authorization would end her career. Maybe worse. Her communication screen lit up with an incoming message. It was marked urgent from Earth Command. Eun opened it quickly. Ambassador Eun, said a human officer. We're contacting you about Commander Park. He missed his scheduled check-in 6 hours ago. Is everything all right there? Eun felt her heart race. You didn't recall them to Earth. The human's face showed alarm. No. Is he missing? I'll find him, Eun promised. Please stand by for further communications. After ending the call, Eun changed into a plain uniform with no rank insignia. She downloaded station maps to her personal device and took a small stun weapon from her security locker. The restricted lab area was in the lowest level of the station. Eun used service corridors to avoid security cameras. Her ambassador's code worked on the first door, but the inner door required higher clearance. Eun pressed her ear to the door. She heard voices inside. The human's cellular resistance is remarkable, said Su's voice. We need to increase the extraction rate. Minister, his vital signs are weakening. Another voice warned. If we push harder, we might lose him. Then work faster, Su snapped. We don't need him alive once we have enough samples. Eun stepped back, horrified. She needed to get Jin Ho out, but she couldn't open the door. She needed help. The station's maintenance system gave her an idea. Eun found a small access panel and crawled into the narrow service tunnel behind it. The tight space made her claustrophobia flare, but she pushed forward. The tunnel led to a junction box for the lab section. Eun carefully rewired the power connections. Warning lights flashed as the emergency system detected the change. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. The lights went out, replaced by dim red emergency lighting. The station AI announced, power failure in Section 12. Emergency protocols activated. All doors releasing for safety evacuation. Eun heard the lab doors slide open. She rushed back through the tunnel and into the corridor. 2 lab technicians ran past her, heading for the evacuation point. Eun slipped into the lab. In the dim red light, she saw Jin-Ho strapped to a table, tubes and wires connected to his body. He looked pale and barely conscious. "Jin-Ho," she whispered, quickly removing the tubes. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. "Eun, is that really you?" "Yes. We need to move quickly." She helped him sit up. "Sue was hurting you, taking things from you without permission." Jin-Ho winced in pain as Eun helped him stand. "Had told me about the Terek." "I don't know." Sue's guards took her. They made it to the corridor just as the backup power system engaged. The doors began to close again. "Run," Eun shouted. They barely made it through the last door before it sealed shut. Ahead was a small maintenance pod used for external repairs. "In here," Eun said, helping Jin-Ho inside. The pod was meant for 1 person, barely big enough for them to sit pressed together. Eun activated the emergency lock, sealing them inside. "We're safe for now," she said, "but we're also trapped." Jin-Ho looked at her with tired eyes. "You risked everything for me." "Yes," Eun said simply. "I did." Jin-Ho and Eun sat pressed together in the small maintenance pod for hours. The space was warm from their body heat, and they could hear search teams passing by outside. "What will they do to us if they find us?" Jin-Ho asked quietly. Eun's black eyes looked sad in the dim light. "Sue will claim you attacked someone. She'll say I helped you. We'll both be locked away. And no one would question it. Some would, but Sue has powerful friends." Unchecked her small device. "The good news is that Earth Command knows you're missing. They've sent messages demanding your return." Jin-Ho winced as he shifted position. His body still hurt from Sue's experiments. "How long can we stay here?" "The pod has emergency supplies for 3 days. By then, we'll need tow." A loud clang on the pod's outer door made them both jump. Ambassador Eun. "Commander Park, are you in there?" It was Dr. Mi's voice. Eun and Jin-Ho exchanged worried looks. "Can we trust her?" Jin-Ho whispered. "I think so," Eun replied. Then louder, "Mai, is anyone with you?" "Just me." "Quickly, open the door." Eun hesitated, then pressed the release. The door slid open to reveal Dr. Mi looking nervous. "Thank goodness," Mai said. "Half the station is looking for you too. The other half is in uproar." "Uproar?" Jin-Ho asked. Mai nodded. Had escaped from detention. Before she was caught, she sent the Terek files to everyone on the station. Everyone knows what Sue did, and what she planned to do to you. "Where is Han now?" Eun asked urgently. "Safe. Minister Du took her into protective custody." Mai looked over her shoulder. "The young Neri are protesting in the central plaza. They're demanding contact with humans be allowed, and for Sue to be removed from the council." Jin-Ho stood up shakily. "Take us there." Mai led them through back corridors. Jin-Ho could hear chanting growing louder as they approached the central plaza. When they reached a viewing balcony, Jin-Ho stopped in surprise. Hundreds of young Neri filled the plaza below. They carried signs with Earth symbols and pictures of human and Neri hands joined together. Several held images of Jin-Ho that must have been taken from security cameras. "This all happened in just a few hours?" Eun asked, amazed. Mai nodded. "The young ones have been fascinated with Earth since you arrived, Jin-Ho. Now they know the truth about our past, about the Terek, and they refuse to let it happen again." At the center of the plaza, Jin-Ho spotted Ha standing on a platform. She was speaking to the crowd, her arms moving passionately. "We can hear her if I boost the speaker," Mai said, adjusting a control panel. Ha's voice suddenly filled the air around them. "Not fear change. The old ways are killing us. Our numbers drop each generation. Are we to simply accept extinction because we fear difference? The human did not come to hurt us. He came in peace with an open hand. And how did we respond? With lies, with cruelty, just as we did to the Tarak. The crowd roared in agreement. What's happening there? Jin-Ho pointed to the far side of the plaza, where security officers were gathering. Ms. Face grew worried. Sue's loyalists. They're preparing to break up the protest. Jin-Ho saw the officers put on helmets and ready shock sticks. It reminded him of riot police on Earth. His chest tightened with worry. I need to go down there, he said. Eun grabbed his arm. Jin-Ho, no, you're still weak, and they'll arrest you immediately. If I don't, people might get hurt. I might get hurt. He looked into Eun's eyes. I can't hide while others fight for me. Mai spoke up. There's another way. The plaza has a central announcement system. From the control room, you could speak to everyone at once. Take us there, Jin-Ho said. The control room was empty when they arrived. Mai quickly activated the system. It's ready, she said. Just press this button to speak. Jin-Ho took a deep breath and pressed the button. This is Commander Jin-Ho Park of Earth, he said. His voice boomed across the plaza. The protesters fell silent. The security officers stopped advancing. I came to your station in peace. I still come in peace. Earth wishes friendship with the Neri, but friendship based on truth and respect. Below, Jin-Ho could see the crowd looking up, searching for the source of his voice. Hai was smiling widely. I am not your enemy, Jin-Ho continued. And I am not your savior either. I'm just a man who believes our two peoples can help each other. Not through force or secrets, but through honest cooperation. At the edge of the plaza, Jin-Ho noticed Minister Du arrive with more officers. They weren't carrying weapons. The choice is yours, Jin-Ho said. What kind of future do you want for the Nari? The plaza erupted in cheers. 3 days after Jin-Ho's speech, the Nari High Council met in their grand chamber. Jin-Ho sat in a special seat for off-world visitors. Un stood beside him, no longer as his guide, but as his official translator. Minister Du led the session. Su was noticeably absent. After reviewing the evidence, Du announced, Minister Su has been removed from the council. She awaits trial for her actions against the Terek visitors and Commander Park. Murmurs filled the chamber. Jin-Ho noticed many young Nari watching from the public balconies. We have also received a formal message from Earth Command, Du continued. They propose a permanent diplomatic mission to Celestial Station, with Commander Park as Chief Ambassador. Jin-Ho sat up straighter. This was news to him. His superiors hadn't mentioned this in their last communication. The council has voted to accept this proposal, Du said, but with conditions. Eun leaned close to Jin-Ho's ear. This is unexpected, she whispered. Minister Du looked directly at Jin-Ho. Commander, your presence has caused great change among our people. Some welcome it, others fear it. We must proceed carefully. Jin-Ho nodded. I understand, Minister. The Earth mission will be housed in a separate section of the station. All contact between humans and Neri will follow strict protocols, developed jointly by our medical teams. Du paused, her expression softening slightly. This is not rejection, Commander. It is caution. What happened with the Terek must never happen again. I agree completely, Jin-Ho said firmly. Good. Du turned to the full council. There is one more matter. Dr. Ha's research has continued. With Commander Park's voluntary assistance, she emphasized the word voluntary. While looking at Jin-Ho, we have developed a treatment that may solve our reproductive crisis. Excited whispers filled the chamber. If successful, this treatment will restore our natural division ability without changing who we are. Du looked around the room. We remain Nari. We choose our own path forward. The council meeting ended with a formal signing ceremony. Jin-Ho used the special pen his superiors had given him for important treaties. As he signed, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Later, Jin-Ho and Eun walked through the garden dome. Things between them had changed. Un wore her formal ambassador robes, and Jin-Ho wore his Earth uniform with new ambassador insignia. "So you're staying," Yun said, looking at the stars through the dome's clear ceiling. "Yes. Earth thinks I've established unique diplomatic value here." Jin-Ho smiled slightly. "I wonder why." "Perhaps because you started a revolution without firing a shot," Yun replied. They reached a small bridge over a pool of glowing water plants. Jin-Ho stopped, turning to face Yun. "What happens now? Between us?" he asked quietly. Yun looked down. "The protocols are clear. Limited contact only. Medical supervision for all human-Nari interactions." "That sounds very cold." "It's necessary for now." Yun's black eyes met his, but protocols can change as we learn more. Jin-Ho wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. The rules were new and fragile. "I'll wait," he said simply. Yun's lips curved in a small smile. "Good." A movement caught Jin-Ho's eye. Hai was approaching with Dr. Mai. They both wore formal science uniforms with new insignia, showing they were part of the human-Nari research team. "Ambassador Park," Has said with a formal bow. "The first group of Earth scientists arrives tomorrow. Their quarters are ready." "Thank you, Dr. Ha," Jin-Ho replied, equally formal. It still felt strange to be called ambassador. Mai stepped forward. "Minister Du requests your presence at the arrival ceremony. Both of you," she added, looking at Yun. After they left, Jin-Ho and Yun continued their walk. They maintained proper distance, but something in the air between them felt charged with possibility. "Did you ever imagine this would happen when I first stepped onto the station?" Jin-Ho asked. "Never," Yun said. "You were just an alien visitor. I was just doing my duty. And now?" Yun stopped walking. For a moment, she looked like she might say something deeply personal. Instead, she straightened her robes and said, "Now we build something new, together." As the station lights dimmed for night cycle, they stood side by side, not touching but closer than they had been before. Above them, Earth shone as a bright blue dot through the dome, a promise of things to come. 1 year had passed since Jin-Ho first stepped onto Celestial Station. Many things had changed. The human section of the station now housed 30 Earth diplomats and scientists. The Nari reproductive crisis was slowly improving, thanks to treatments developed from Jin-Ho's DNA. Jin-Ho stood alone on the special observation deck that connected the human and Nari sections. This was the neutral zone where meetings could happen without special permission. He watched the stars and thought about how far they had come. The door slid open behind him. Jin-Ho turned to see Un enter. She wore a simple blue robe instead of her formal ambassador clothes. "I thought I might find you here," she said, coming to stand beside him, watching the stars again. "Just thinking," Jin-Ho replied. 1 year ago today, I first arrived." Yun smiled and caused quite a stir. "As I recall, you weren't too happy to see me at first. I was confused by my reaction to you." Yun's cheeks darkened slightly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as a small ship approached the station. It was the weekly transport from Europa, Jupiter's moon, where the first joint human-Nari settlement was being built. "How is Ha doing at the settlement?" Jin-Ho asked. "Very well. Her message yesterday said they've completed the main dome." Yun's voice filled with pride. "She's become quite the leader." "And the treatment, is it still working?" Yun nodded. "Yes. The latest reports show a 62% increase in successful divisions among the test group. And..." She hesitated. "And what?" Jin-Ho prompted. "There's something else. Something not in the official reports yet." Yun looked nervous but excited. "One of the Nari scientists on Europa has produced a child that shows both Nari and human genetic markers." Jin-Ho's eyes widened. "A hybrid. I thought that wasn't possible." "So did we. It seems our biology is more compatible than we realized." Yun looked out at the stars. "The child is healthy and growing normally. It has 5 parents, 4 Nari, and 1 human who donated genetic material. That's amazing, Jinho said softly. A new kind of family. A new kind of future, Yun corrected. The observation deck doors opened again. Minister Du entered with 2 human diplomats. Jinho recognized them as the new arrivals from Earth. Ambassador Park, Du said with a formal bow. These officials wish to discuss the Europa project. Jinho nodded. Of course, Minister. As the diplomats approached, one of them looked curiously between Jinho and Yun. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, she said. Not at all, Jinho replied professionally. Ambassador Yun and I were just discussing the progress reports. The meeting was brief. After the Earth diplomats and Minister Du left, Jinho and Yun were alone again. The protocols have changed, Yun said suddenly. Jinho looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? The council voted yesterday. After a year of study, they've determined that casual contact between humans and Nari is safe. No more medical supervision required for basic interactions. That's good news, Jinho said carefully. A sign of trust. Yun took a step closer to him. Jinho, do you remember when you asked me what happens next between us? I remember. I couldn't answer then. There were too many rules, too many uncertainties. Yun's voice grew soft. But I've thought about it every day since. Jinho felt his heart beat faster. And now? Yun reached out slowly and took his hand. Her skin was warm against his. This simple touch, the first time they had truly touched, sent a jolt through Jinho's body. 20 years without a man, Yun whispered, looking into his eyes. And you were just standing there. What was I supposed to do? Jinho smiled and gently squeezed her hand. What happens now? Now we find out, Yun said simply. Outside the window, Jupiter's great red spot glowed in the distance. The small transport ship docked at the station, bringing more humans and Nari together. Somewhere on Europa, a child of 2 worlds was taking its first steps into a future no one had imagined possible a year ago. And on the observation deck, 2 people from different stars stood hand in hand, no longer separated by protocols or fear, just the beginning of something new.